Hi, today I want to talk about something that often goes unspoken among men over 50, why so many choose never to remarry, not because they have to stay single, but because they want to. In this video, I'll share 5 honest and often overlooked truths behind that choice. The reasons why so many divorced men never remarry run far deeper than most people realize, layered in quiet truths and choices made far from the noise of public opinion. There comes a time in a man's life when silence no longer feels like loneliness, but peace, a kind of freedom that comes from no longer having to explain yourself. After years of compromises and feeling unheard, many divorced men find comfort in solitude. If you're a man in your 50s or beyond, or if you care about one, this might just give you a new perspective. And stay with me until the end, because the final reason is something many men carry in silence, yet few are ever asked about. If this message resonates with you, don't hesitate to give it a like, sharing it with someone who might need it, and subscribing for more quiet truths like this one. Now, let's move into the first reason, and it's one many men discover only after the noise of a broken marriage fades. Number 1. Emotional clarity becomes a priority. Man conquers the world by conquering himself. Zeno of Citium, founder of Stoicism. Emotional clarity isn't something most people chase in the beginning. It's something they grow into, slowly, painfully, and with time. For many divorced men, especially past 50, clarity doesn't come with noise. It comes with quiet. My father often comes to mind when I speak on this. After his divorce, he never remarried, and not because he lacked opportunities. It's just that something in him settled. I remember visiting him years after it all ended. The house was still, but not empty. Peaceful, not lonely. He sat by the window, a worn copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations in hand. Looking up, he smiled and said, "You know what I miss? Nothing. I finally get to think in my own voice." That stuck with me, because so many men spend years navigating emotional unpredictability, softening their tone, shrinking their needs, translating moods. And when it's finally over, what they long for isn't another partner. It's their own mind returned to them. Solitude becomes sacred, not because they've given up on love, but because they've fallen back in love with themselves, with quiet mornings, with unspoken thoughts, with peace. He wasn't bitter. He was rooted, anchored in a kind of inner stillness that had taken years to earn. He no longer braced for the next emotional storm, not because he expected life to be easier, but because he had come to trust his own center. In that quiet, something bloomed. He began to cook again, not just meals, but memories, aromas that reminded him of who he was before life became negotiation. He kept a journal, not to explain himself, but to listen to his own thoughts. He took up woodworking, hands shaping something solid, something his. And some days he just watched the birds, marveling at how they made peace look effortless. It wasn't idleness. It was renewal. And in that renewal, he rediscovered something most men forget:
The joy of simply being without needing to be understood. Emotional clarity became his new wealth. Not loud, not flashy, just steady. And for him, that was enough. Have you ever felt that shift? That moment when silence becomes a teacher, not a punishment? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this kind of reflection speaks to you, a quiet tap on the like button goes a long way. Truth, like peace, doesn't need to shout, but it's always worth sharing. Let's move on to the second reason, and this one challenges the very idea of what companionship means later in life.
Number 2. Companionship Redefined. We often grow up being told that life is meant to be shared, that the ultimate fulfillment comes from finding someone to grow old with. But there's a quiet truth that ripens with age. Not all companionship looks the same, and not all of it is necessary in the form we were taught to seek. For many older men, the idea of partnership shifts, not out of fear, but out of awareness. They've learned the weight of mismatched connections, the strain of constantly explaining themselves, the fatigue of sacrificing stillness for surface-level intimacy. And with that knowledge comes a gentle refusal, a choice to no longer chase what no longer nourishes. Being alone isn't always loneliness. In fact, the absence of a partner often makes space for richer, more meaningful forms of connection, with nature, with old friends, with one's inner life. There's a companionship in solitude that isn't spoken about enough. It isn't marked by grand gestures or shared calendars, but by moments of deep personal alignment. An older male doctor's voice was warm, clear, and calm, with a deep timbre and a deliberately slow, thoughtful pace. Keep the tone consistent. Keep this tone throughout the entire script. Keep this tone consistent. Keep this tone throughout the entire script. An older man who has come through the fire of divorce may come to see that his deepest need was never to be completed by someone else, but to return, whole, to himself. And in doing so, the desperation to couple up again fades. What replaces it isn't isolation, it's contentment. When companionship no longer means escape from oneself, but rather the gentle presence of one's own peace, something profound changes. He may still love, still care deeply, still be open, but only if it adds to the calm, never disrupts it. If you've been rethinking what closeness truly means, just know that's a natural part of growing wiser. Take your time. Protect your peace. And if this message has touched something within you, quietly pass it on. Maybe leave a like, too. It helps more than you think. So, what happens when a man stops chasing passion and begins choosing peace on purpose? The next reason reveals exactly that, and it's more common than most would dare to admit. Number 3. Choosing peace over passion. So what happens when a man stops chasing passion and begins choosing peace on purpose? The third reason reveals exactly that, and it's more common than most would dare to admit.
Through time, many men come to realize that what once felt like love was often a form of noise, an intoxicating storm of emotion that promised warmth but often delivered restlessness. In youth, passion is mistaken for depth. But with age, a man begins to understand that peace is not the absence of intensity, but the presence of stillness without anxiety. Relationships that burn brightly often leave behind smoke. And when a man has walked through enough of those fires, he no longer seeks heat, he seeks clarity. Predictability, a rhythm that nourishes rather than depletes. It's like stepping out of a crowded room where everyone's speaking at once and into a quiet garden where the only sound is the wind moving through the trees. That shift from external validation to inner quiet is not a retreat from love. It's a return to a kind of love that doesn't require turbulence to feel real.
Research from the Institute for Family Studies shows that men over 50 who remain unmarried after divorce often report higher levels of life satisfaction when they have control over their time, space, and emotional environment. In other words, peace isn't just poetic, it's measurable. This isn't about giving up on connection. It's about refining what one is willing to invite into his life. Peace becomes a boundary, not a wall. And passion? It's welcome only when it can sit quietly beside peace, not threaten it. The world may romanticize grand declarations and sparks that fly, but there's something quietly powerful about a man who chooses the slow burn of peace over the wildfire of longing. As the philosopher Epicurus once said, peace of mind is the highest good. He isn't running from love. He's choosing not to lose himself in it. Have you felt that shift in your own life, the moment you realized your energy is sacred? Let me know in the comments. And if this reflection brought you even a moment of clarity, share it with someone who walks a similar road. Let's continue, because the next reason takes us deeper into the psychology of men after divorce and what truly changes on the inside.
Number 4. The inner landscape has changed. When a man walks through the ruins of a marriage, he doesn't just rebuild his routines, he rewires his entire sense of self. It's not always visible from the outside, but within, something profound shifts. The man who once derived his identity from the role he played, husband, provider, protector, begins to ask quieter, more honest questions. Who am I without that title? What do I actually need now, not what I was told I should want? The answers don't always come quickly. They emerge slowly, like stones revealed as the tide pulls back. And as they appear, many men discover that the hunger they once had for external validation has softened. The ego that once needed to be needed now makes space for something else, inner congruence. He no longer tries to fit into old molds, shapes designed by others, built from expectation and tradition. Instead, he begins to shape a life that fits him like worn linen, soft, unassuming, and real. This is not reinvention, it's remembrance,
the slow, sacred excavation of a self buried beneath decades of duty and quiet concessions. Like an old tree reclaiming its natural shape after years of being pruned, he stretches back toward his original form, not perfect, not polished, but whole in his own unspoken way. This is why remarriage often feels unnecessary, not because he has closed his heart, but because his heart now beats to a different rhythm. He doesn't seek to be completed. He seeks to remain whole. There's a line from Carl Jung that speaks to this moment of quiet reformation. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. And in this awakening, remarriage for many men is not a rejection of love, but a refinement of it. The inner world has changed, and with it, the standards of what is welcomed in. Some truths aren't declared, they're lived, quietly, day by day. The final reason is one of those truths, not so much a decision, but a quiet rhythm of life that many men settle into without needing to justify it to anyone. Number 5. Silence becomes strength. Some truths aren't declared, they're lived, quietly, day by day. The final reason is one of those truths, not so much a decision, but a quiet rhythm of life that many men settle into without needing to justify it to anyone. Silence, to the man who has weathered storms, is no longer an empty room. It's a monastery, a sanctuary, a place where the self, once scattered in the noise of others' expectations, gathers itself again. Like a forest in winter, it may appear bare on the surface, but beneath it is alive with unseen growth. For many men after divorce, this silence becomes their greatest ally. It doesn't demand, it doesn't perform, it simply allows. And in that allowance, something powerful happens. The man no longer needs to explain his choices to the world, because he has already explained them to himself. In a society that mistakes visibility for value, choosing silence is a radical act of self-respect. He is no longer interested in performing closeness or narrating pain. He learns that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet refusal to be hurried, to be pulled, to be anything other than still and sovereign. Not everything needs a witness. Not every insight must be voiced. There is a kind of wisdom that takes root in stillness, like the roots of a tree digging deeper while the surface stays unmoved. As philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. And perhaps silence is the only space honest enough for that kind of becoming. So, remarriage? It may come, or it may not, but it no longer defines him. Because for the man who has reclaimed his inner quiet, peace is no longer the goal, it is the ground. If you felt that kind of quiet strength,
The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be real. Hold on to it. Trust it. And when you're ready, share it with someone who might need the reminder.
Choosing living alone is a different kind of freedom, when wholeness replaces the need to belong. A river doesn't ask for permission to carve a new path. It simply does, quietly, over time. And perhaps that's what this journey has been about. Not resisting change, but surrendering to a gentler way of becoming. The reasons why many divorced men never remarry are not rooted in fear or bitterness. They are rooted in clarity, maturity, and a deep reverence for inner peace. We've walked through 5 reflections together, each revealing how solitude can be sacred, how peace can outweigh passion, and how silence itself can become a kind of power. What we find is not a man who has given up on love, but a man who has finally learned how to love without losing himself. In a world that constantly pushes us toward more, toward proving, toward explaining, there's something revolutionary about simply being. Being whole, being present, being enough, even without the old titles or roles. And maybe that's the quiet wisdom of this chapter in life, that you don't need to remarry to be complete, and you don't need to be loud to be heard. Sometimes just living with intention is the most powerful statement of all. If this video offered you something to think about, something real, then I'd be honored if you gave it a like, left a thought in the comments, or shared it with someone who might be walking the same quiet path. Until next time, stay steady, stay sovereign, and remember, your peace is not a compromise, it's a legacy. And I'm Vernon. Thanks for watching my video.